Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Again, I am Sheridan Hughes. If you weren't on this morning's session, just as a recap, I am Chase Early's assistant, and I work very closely with this committee. I wanted to say thank you to everyone for being here today. I'm so glad that we were able to meet through Zoom. We've incorporated the CLE program into the retreat much like we would in an in-person setting to continue to facilitate the professional development of our committee members and to provide quality content for all members of the Florida Bar. So you will receive 3 general credits, 1.5 professionalism credits, and 1.5 ethics credits for attending the program today. We are recording the segments and we'll make the recording available on the CLE committee page of the Florida Bar's website. So just keep an eye out for that, and I will send the link out for that as well. So we want to go ahead and get started so that our speakers have ample time to present. We have 2 amazing speakers lined up for you today. They'll speak back to back, so we'll begin with Miss Christy Crump, who will introduce herself, then present her materials. Then we will have a short 15-minute break, followed by Miss Rebecca Bandy, who will introduce herself, then present her materials. The speakers have requested that you enter any questions into the Q&A box down at the bottom, and they'll answer all of your questions at the end of each presentation. Please keep in mind that we are recording, so remain on mute throughout the duration of the presentations to minimize noise and any interruptions. I believe we're ready to begin. So Ms. Christy Crump, you're welcome to introduce yourself.
All right, great. Thank you so much. So as you heard, I am Christy Crump. Let me give you just a little bit of background information on myself. I am currently the Director of Operations for RCS Training, which is part of the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. We are a wholly owned for-profit subsidiary that is owned by the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. And I actually have about 15 years in the professional development training realm. I started my own company many years ago. I had a national training company. And when the association called and offered me a job heading their hospitality regulatory training department, I took that job, and a few months later, they absorbed my business into the for-profit. And so I actually now head 2 divisions. I have a team of 50 here in the state of Florida who do hospitality regulatory training. And I have a team of about 10 who do professional development training for any industries, and that's nationwide. So just one little personal tidbit about me, in case there are any on the call who do not already know this. The beautiful Sheridan Crump, who just did your introduction, is my beautiful daughter. And I have her lovely pregnancy picture here behind me from when sweet little Hendrix was born a few months ago. And so I am very proud to be here, not only representing RCS training, but also because Sheridan asked if I would do this. And I was very moved when she asked me to be here with you. So let's jump into our topic, and I am looking forward to saving a little bit of time at the end for question and answers. But our topic today is Generation Z, your soon-to-be colleagues and clients. Now, when I say Generation Z, let me define that. That means the group or the generation that are ages 6 to 23. Now, you're going to see different birth years for this group depending on which expert you listen to, which book you look at, what video you watch on YouTube. Every time you look at generational differences, the birth years are different depending on which expert you're talking to. So the years that I'm using are 1997 to 2014, and so ages 6 to 23 right now. And the reason that this information is important is thinking about ages 6 to 23, you are going to have some Generation Zs already coming in to your workplace. And so you need to be ready for them. You need to know what are the influences that cause their personality, their generational personality to be what it is. And how do you communicate effectively with them? How do you work with them? Not only that, if you're not already representing some Gen Zs as your clients, that is going to start happening soon as well. And you're going to need to be comfortable with communicating with them and getting them ready to go on a stand in a court of law if you need. So this is very important from a work perspective. However, understanding Generation Z is also quite important from a personal perspective as well. Because many of you on this call may have children or grandchildren who are in this age range. You may teach classes at a school or a college. You may coach ball. You may teach a Sunday school class. And anytime you can have information that helps you to better communicate, to get along with, and to better acclimate, will help you to work better with this age group. Now, there's another reason why I think it's important for us to be paying close attention to this age group right now. It's not just from a work and a personal perspective. I need you to understand the power that this generation is going to have very soon. As you're going to see in just a minute, we're going to look at the numbers, how many people there are in each generation. And you're going to hear that Generation Z is the largest generation currently in the country and in the world. And their power, once they come into the workplace and they combine forces with the other large generation, the millennials, that power is going to be so strong that those of us who are in an older age range, like myself, if we were to get pushed out of our careers or out of the workplace, it would be very difficult for us to find our way back in. So it is vitally important that we understand how to acclimate to and how to work effectively with this generation. So let's take a look at this chart that I've given you. And this is a chart that you may have seen in any generational differences workshop that you've attended. And I wanted to give you everything on here so that you could take this and use it to your advantage later if you wanted to see the differences in the generations. We are, of course, going to focus mostly on the last column on this slide, which is Generation Z, or as you can see at the top there, another name for them right now is iGens. And as I said, I have used the years 1997 to 2014. What I did is I kind of took the middle years to use with this group. You could see some books or experts say that they started in 1995. Some say they started in the year 2000. I just went in the middle for our purposes today and went with 1997 to 2014. Now, I want to drill down and look at some very specific information about the generations and really to give you a picture of what we have coming up with Generation Z. So if you take a look at this chart that I've given you on this slide, let's look at the numbers of each of the generations. For veteran generation, there are about 20 million right now in the United States. The baby boomers, about 72 million. Gen X, now that's my generation, notice 65 million. We are a much smaller generation overall. For those of you who may not be familiar with this information, obviously the baby boomers were a huge generation. That's why they are called the baby boomers. There was a baby boom after the world wars. And so that generation was very large. Well, the baby boomers, one of the characteristics of their generation is that they like to work, and take care of themselves. And they weren't as focused on having a lot of children as their parents were. And so boomers had fewer children. That's why the Gen X generation is much smaller. This information is going to be important a few minutes from now when we start talking about how quickly those two generations, boomers and Gen X's, are starting to retire out of the workforce, and how quickly that's going to happen because of the size of the Gen X generation. So just keep that in mind. Going on down the list, when we look at Gen Y, or what many of us call millennials, they are at 75 million, as I said, quite a large generation. And then look at Gen Zs, or iGens, 85 million. That is huge. Let me give you a couple of other statistics here on your screen. This year, Gen Z comprises 27% of the US population. That is over one quarter. Over one quarter of the US population is under the age of 23. That is massive. Look at the next statistic that I gave you here on your screen. By the year 2022, so in fewer than 2 years, in under 2 years from now, Gen Z will be 20% of the workforce. When you take that 20% and you combine it with the 50% of the workforce that the millennials will be, That means that 70% of the workforce will be under the age of 41. Let that sink in for just a second. In under 2 years from now, 70% of the workforce will be under the age of 41. Okay. I hear people say all the time, oh, those kids, those crazy kids, those millennials coming in. Listen, that is the biggest pet peeve I have. The millennials are in. The millennials are solidified. The millennials are already some of your supervisors. You have millennials that are managing partners in your law firms. There are millennials who are they own their own firm. They own their own businesses. Millennials are here. They are fully ingrained. They are steady Eddie. Gen Z coming in behind them is going to, they're just going to add to those numbers and increase that power that those millennials have. Millennials are here. We've already got a handle on them. We now need to get a handle on Gen Z as well, so that we can help them to be the best they can be, so that when we have that 70% who's under the age of 41, they are able to lead and guide and take care of what needs to be taken care of, not only in business, but for us in our personal lives as we age, in government, etc., all the way up the line. Now, let me give you a couple of other interesting tidbits about Generation Z that's going to play into understanding their generational personality as we go on and talk. Generation Z is the first majority non-white generation in U.S. history. So I want to say that again because I want to make sure that everybody caught what I just said. Generation Z is the first majority non-white generation in U.S. history. They are the most racially and ethnically diverse generation in this country's history. They have a generational personality that is inclusive and accepting. And that is going to be a very big part of who they are and what they expect as they're coming into the workplace. We're going to talk about that in a lot more detail. Now, obviously, the reasons for them being the first majority non-white generation would be immigration. I'm sure that's probably the first thing that came to most people's minds. Also, think about interracial marriages are a lot more accepted today than they were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And also, there has been a huge uptick in adoptions from other countries. And so all of those numbers factor in when we're looking at that population and at these generations. So there are some very good reasons why this has happened. And I believe that Gen Z is going to be that generation that ushers us into where we have a better and more comprehensive acceptance and understanding of all differences that people offer, especially today in the workplace. Now, you've noticed I've gone back and forth with Gen Z, iGens. That name iGen, as you could probably imagine, has come about from the word internet. Obviously, this is a generation that has never not known the internet. This is a generation that has had the internet from birth. So the word internet is really where it comes from, iGens. Most people think that it's coming from, as you can see in the picture, the very thing that many of us are guilty of doing to our own children is where they grow up knowing everything, iPhone, iPad, iTunes, etc. So for them to be the iGens is a pretty understandable leap to that name. You may hear the term iGener. I prefer iGen because it's just a little bit easier to say. I use the terms interchangeably, but it does appear that iGen is what we're going to end up with as their actual name. Now, I want to play a video for you because as we start getting into talking about iGens, I want you to hear from their perspective what they're thinking about themselves. So this is a video where you're going to hear from a couple of older experts, but you're also going to hear from a young man who is a Gen Z, and he gives you a lot of really interesting information about his generation. So take a look at this video and then we'll talk through it.
Generations are really about cultural change. By studying generations, we can get an idea of how growing up now as a child or a teen is different from it was for, say, the Gen Xers growing up in the 80s or the Boomers growing up in the 1960s.
Looking specifically at numbers, we define Gen Z as those born between 1995 and 2012.
1995 just happens to be the year the internet was commercialized. So that also captures the generation of people who were born after the internet existed, who don't know a world without the internet. Compared to previous generations, they spend a lot more time communicating with their friends electronically, and they also spend less time hanging out with their friends in person.
My generation, we're truly digital natives. We've really only known a world where our phones are smart. You know, we turn to technology for a lot of things, whether it be entertainment, research, education. It's truly just part of who we are.
I'm not entirely convinced that iGen's skill with social media is going to be a complete positive. It's also linked to depression and anxiety and unhappiness, especially for people who are spending too much time on social media, who are comparing themselves to others too much.
You know, people always talk about taking digital detoxes and stepping away for a little bit. And I don't know if it's necessarily cutting out the phone for a month at a time, but understanding that it's okay to put down your phone for a couple hours, don't have it at the dinner table, try not to be on your phone right before bed. There's just time and a place for everything, and I think understanding that is really important.
I think something that parents can do to help with this anxiety, the phones and information overload, is really helping them sort of analyze and prioritize the information is what we find is something that's definitely needed with this generation.
At the moment, what many people think of when they think of iGen is a teen or a young adult, looking at his or her phone. But I think they'll become known for other things as time goes on.
One of our traits that, is very upfront with my generation is that we're very, very realistic. At a young age, we were thrown into a world that you could say wasn't the prettiest. We grew up amongst the 2009 recession, after 9/11, and our parents didn't tell us we could necessarily be whatever we wanted. They told us that it's a hard world out there. You're gonna have to work your butt off, and if you're not willing to, there's plenty of others that will.
Gen Z entering the workforce, it's going to be a lot of change. For Gen Z, if I can log on and log in, I'm at work. So I think the physical office is really going to be challenged. Another thing that we know about this generation they're really going to challenge is the pace at which things get done. Everyone talks about work-life balance. I got my work and my life, and works from 9 to 5, and then your life, and how do we balance the two? What I love about Gen Z is they just don't think it works, and it really hasn't worked. What they go for is work-life blend, where work and life are 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
By spring of their senior year, iGen teens are less likely, compared to previous generations, to have their driver's license, to work at a paid job, to go out on dates, to drink alcohol. And we've already seen this with millennials in young adulthood, taking longer to settle into careers, to marry, to have children, and so on. So the whole developmental trajectory is slowed down.
Gen Z is by far the most diverse generation ever, and we're also the most interconnected around the globe. And part of the reason is, now with our generation, when something happens, the entire world finds out immediately through social media, through hashtags. We're always connected to each other, so we feel as though whether it happened in the same building or 1,000 miles away, it is immediately affecting us because we hear about it, and so we feel obligated to help and be a part of the situation, whether it's positive or negative.
They are also the one that values equality the most, whether we're talking about race or gender or sexual orientation or transgender issues. They're really much more open and focused on equality.
We really do not fear failure. So whether it be through political activation or entering a new workplace or trying new things, we're willing to try something and fail.
And this is going to have a great impact on the other generations. For the rest of us who have been so cautious, that's going to really rub off to get us to step outside our box and maybe try some new things.
Okay, so, sorry about that. Okay, give me 1 second. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, sorry about that little technical difficulty. I'll refer back to several of the things that you saw in that video as we go through the rest of our time together. I wanted to give you the book that quite a bit of the information from today's webinar came from, and it's on your screen for you here. As you can see, Jean Twenge is the PhD who was in that video just a minute ago, and her book is iGen: Why Today's Super Connected Kids Are Growing Up Less Rebellious, More Tolerant, Less Happy, and Completely Unprepared for Adulthood, and what that means for the rest of us. And what she did in this book that I especially like is she took the theme of I, the letter I, and she made 10 I words that help us to better remember what the personality traits of this generation are. And it's always easier when you have a list that has the words with all the same first letter. So we have 10 I words we're going to go through. And what I want you to pay close attention to as I'm talking through the 10 I words, there's an underlying theme in everything we're going to talk about here on out of safety and caution. And you're going to hear me say that over and over and over again, safety. iGens have the need for safety. Everything that they do, they think through. Now, they say, if I have to go to this place, what might happen if I go here by myself versus with my friends? What if something bad happens while I'm there? What will I do? What if I say something I shouldn't say? They're constantly thinking through situations, scenarios, what they have to do, what they should be doing, what they will be doing. They're always thinking through, and everything that guides them comes back to this theme of safety. Am I going to be safe? Am I going to be physically safe, psychologically safe, financially safe? Is anything going to happen that could hurt me or someone else in any of those ways? And you'll find that this generation is constantly thinking in that direction. Now, let me take a sidestep here for just a second and say, what we're going to talk about for the rest of our time together are generalities. Not every person who is age 6 to 23 is going to perfectly fit into all 10 of the I word categories that I give you. We've got to think about generalities here. Also, I don't want you to just think about your own children as I'm talking to you. If you happen to have children or grandchildren in this age range, you know how when you take your daughter over to a friend's house to spend the night, and you go to pick up your daughter, and the friend's mom says, "Oh my gosh, your daughter is so sweet. She's so helpful. She did the dishes. She's so polite. She said please and thank you the whole time she's here." And you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, my daughter? You're talking about this one. Mine? Because she doesn't do that at home, but you're saying she does that with you. Wow. Your children act differently when they're away from you than they do when they're with you. So I want you to open your mind up. First of all, don't just think about your own children, what you know personally, but also then I don't want you to go too far and say, well, everyone in this category fits every single thing that she says. That's not true either. We kind of have to go in the middle. So I am giving you generalities. Now, with this theme of safety, let's think about what the influences are that Generation Z has had so far in their lives. And I say so far because really the research so far is coming from that older half of this generation. Those who are ages 6 to about 12, they're still developing, they're still forming, their cognitive reasoning skills are not developed yet. So we may have a little change in this information over the next 5 to 10 years. And I will guarantee you that we will have some changes in this information after the effects of the COVID pandemic show their effect, long-term effect on this generation. But the influences that we know for sure we have to date, and these are on that chart that I gave you with all of the generations, slide number 2. The first influence is, and as you heard the young man say in the video, that Gen Z is the first post 9/11 generation. Gen Z was born at a time when terrorism was already real. They are not a generation that experienced terrorism for the first time. They're not a generation who their parents are saying, oh my gosh, look what just happened, or let's think about what happened a few years ago. They actually have been born into a country that stays on terrorist alert at all times. Take that to the next terrorist type influence, and that is the uptick in school violence or school shootings specifically. This generation lives every day in their school environment going through school shooter drills. Their teachers go through active shooter training. Their cafeteria workers go through active shooter training. I want some of you on the call, those of you who are about my age range, think about how much me and we used to hate the school fire drills. Like 2 times a month, you'd have a fire drill. Some of you may have grown up in areas of the country where you were taken through tornado drills. What to do if a tornado comes? You get under your desk, you run in the closet. Our kids today, our students in school today, go through active shooter drills. Think about that for just a second. They go to school every day with the expectation that they could be shot and killed that day. If that does not weigh your heart down, I don't know what would. But our kids, our children, go to school every day with the expectation that they could die. That is a major influence on why this generation is constantly thinking about their safety. You heard the young man in the video say the recession. This generation experienced the global recession and the housing bust a few years ago. Most of them as younger kids, where they watched their parents have to tighten their belts. You may have had to pull your kids out of private school and put them in public school. You may have had to sell your house. You may have lost your house. They may have heard mom and dad say things like, yeah, I'm really sorry that we can't go to Disney World for your birthday this year. We just can't afford it. And we're gonna have to go to the local skating rink instead this year, maybe Disney next year. So these kids lived through that at a time where they could understand enough that it impacted them. And now they want financial safety that they saw their parents not have a few years ago. Smart devices. Now, let me give an education for anyone who needs it. This is no longer a phone. This is not a phone. It should not be called a phone. This is a smart device. Generation Z has grown up with a smart device in their hands and in front of their faces from the day they could hold it in their hands. Now, some of you as parents or guardians may have said, no, we're not going to do that until they get to a certain age. Kudos to you. There are some of us, and I will admit straight up that my 18-year-old has had this in her hands since she could hold it. Not her own necessarily, but using mine or my husband's to entertain herself. This is a smart device, and this is a major influence on Generation Z and how they work. Another influence that they've had is their own millennial siblings. Now, think about Generation X. Many of us have had a child that is a millennial, and then we had a child who is a Gen Z. This is another interesting thing that has gone on is Generation X, more of us have children that cross a generation than what we have seen in previous generations. So many of us have a millennial and a Gen Z. That happens to be me. As a matter of fact, I have Sheridan, who is 26, and I have Baylor, who is 18. And what has happened is Generation Z has watched their millennial brothers and sisters and seen what didn't work for them. And they have been influenced by that and made decisions that they're going to do things quite differently than their millennial brothers and sisters. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then the last major influence that they have had is understanding the uptick in cybercrime. And I know when most of us hear cybercrime, we think of our identity being stolen or our bank accounts being hacked. Gen Z is aware of those things. But cyberbullying, not just cybercrime, is not what they think about. They think about cyberbullying. And I want you to think about the influence that cyberbullying has had on this generation and is continuing to have on them. Many of us, when we were bullied in school at a younger age, it's out on the playground. I was the fat little girl, and 2 or 3 boys would make fun of me on the playground. That was it. Today, when someone gets made fun of via social media, there are thousands of people who join in on making fun of them, and it goes over thousands over time, 1,000 times faster than what it ever could on the playground. So when we want to say, oh, kids today, we were all bullied, it's no different. it is very, very different for Gen Z because their bullying is not in person on the playground. It is cyberbullying, which is 1,000 times faster and 1,000 times worse than what any of us experienced on the playground. So these are some things that we need to keep in mind as we start trying to understand them. Now, here are the 10 I words that I told you I pulled from the book and that we're going to talk through. In no hurry, indefinite, internet, in person no more, insulated but not intrinsic, insecure, income insecurity, irreligious, independent, and inclusive. So let's go through each one of these and talk about them in a little bit more detail. What I did with the first two, numbers 1 and 2, in no hurry and indefinite, I put them together because they kind of go together and it was easier to just throw them together and talk about them as one. So what this means is that Generation Z is in no hurry to grow up quickly. You heard that again in the video where Jean said they're just in no hurry. We saw this start with the millennial generation where they did things at a little bit later age, getting into their careers, getting married, starting families, etc. We're seeing that with Gen Zs, and we're seeing it even more. It's even more exaggerated with Generation Z. So in no hurry to grow up. And indefinite here means that they are indefinite. They have developed new ideas, new attitudes towards the traditional way of doing things. So they're indefinite towards the traditional old school ways of doing things. We've always done it this way. Well, we've always had that policy. Well, the standard timeline you would follow is Gen Z is very indefinite to all of that. They have new and different ideas and attitudes towards it. And again, I want to go back to the power in numbers. Millennials are very much like Gen Z in both of these respects. But Gen Z is even more so. You take that 20% coming into the workforce with that 50% you already have of millennials, and 70% of your workforce is in no hurry, and they are indefinite to the way we've always done it. Let's look at some specific examples where we're going to see some of these things, and some of you may have already seen these. So driving. Now, some of you may remember, like me, man, in Florida, when you're getting ready to turn 15, you are harassing your mom, your dad, whoever, to get you to the DMV so you can get that learner's permit. Because, man, when you're 16, you want that driver's license. So you're hounding them. You know you're getting ready to turn 16. You make sure mama lets you out of school that day. You set an appointment. You get to the DMV, you get there early enough where you can show up at school later and show everybody your new driver's license. Right, man, 16 on my birthday, driver's license. Okay, Generation Z, that is not the case. They are much slower and are prolonging getting their learner's permit, which of course then prolongs them getting their driver's license. And they're just in no hurry to do it. And they are just indefinite to the, yeah, but come on, when you're 15, 16, that's what you're supposed to do. No, they're going to do it when they're ready. Let's go back to that overall theme that I told you about a few minutes ago, caution and safety. When iGens or Generation Z, when they're thinking about driving a car, they're going through a process where they're saying to themselves, when I start driving, what if I accidentally drive too fast and I get a ticket? That could hurt me. I'm going to have to pay for it. So financially, that could hurt me. And my parents' insurance would go up. That would hurt them. Or if I'm paying my own insurance, that would hurt me. What if I got into an accident? I could hurt someone else. I could hurt myself. I could damage a car and have a financial difficulty. What if my parents want to buy me a car and they really can't afford that and they want to try and do it anyway, and I would feel really bad about that? Do you see this thought process that they go through? And because there is a potential non-safety issue, they back up. I'm not telling you they won't ever get their driver's license, but they will delay in doing it. Now, you, again, generalities here, you may have that child, that 15, 16-year-old in your house that, man, that was the first thing they did. They wanted to run and get their driver's license. But I bet if I had to lay money on it, there are more of you on this call who would say, Well, that explains why my kid is dragging their feet on getting their driver's license. I couldn't understand it, but they are. Let's go to the next one, sex. Again, you heard Jean say in the video that Generation Z, what we have found so far with the older part of the generation, is that they are having sex at a little bit older age than the other generations have. Again, let's talk about safety and caution. In their mind, they're thinking, if I have sex, I could end up pregnant as a teenager. If I have sex, I could get an STD. If I have sex, I could be putting myself into a situation where I could be sexually assaulted by someone. So, you know what, let me wait. Let me be ready for that. Let me think about it a little bit more. Let me make sure that it's safe before I do it. And some of this influence is coming from what they're seeing on their smart device, in the media. Some of it could be from what they've seen, again, from their millennial siblings. But they're taking a step back and they're thinking about things. Alcohol and drugs, same thing. They are a little bit delayed in trying alcohol or drugs for the first time or engaging in these activities. If I drink and I drive, I could hurt someone. If I drink and get drunk and I'm at a party and one of my friends takes a video of me and puts it out on social media, that could be embarrassing to me. That could hurt me. And then people are going to make fun of me. And then I could end up getting depressed from that. And then I might want to commit suicide. You see how this thought process is working in this generation? Marriage and kids, same thing. We're going to see a delay in marriage and kids. If I get married, then I am financially responsible for other people. What if I fail? Or I have to raise these kids, and what if I don't know how to do that quite right? And this is where the indefinite part comes in. With Gen Z, any of us, again, I'm going to go to the older generations, or perhaps the way that some of us on the call may have been raised, where, well, you're supposed to go to high school and you're supposed to finish college and then you're supposed to get married and then you're supposed to have children. And there's this order of things. Gen Z is indefinite to that order. We may see in the next few years where Gen Zs do things in whatever order they feel like at the time, what makes sense to them, what works for them. And we may not see marriage come before kids. We have seen that a little bit with the millennials, and we will see it more with Gen Z. And then work. Used to be that, again, many of you on the call can probably associate with me in this. I was working at the age of 11. I wanted money, I wanted independence, and I was working at the age of 11. By the age of 14, I was working for the Florida Department of Labor. I already had a job in a state agency at the age of 14. Well, Generation Z is not going to be like that. They are delayed in going out and finding that first teenage job or any teenage job because they want to feel safe in that job. If I leave my home, I might not be safe. Am I going to work in an environment where I could be physically hurt? And if so, then I don't want to do that. Or an environment that maybe people make fun of for some reason, and I don't want to do that. And so they're going to put off getting that job. Now, I want you to keep all of this in mind from the perspective of Generation Z coming into your workplace in the next few years. As they're coming in, what we're going to need to do is to help them understand that the safety issue, this caution issue, this thinking through everything to the point that it makes them over anxious is actually detrimental to them. And as they're coming into our workplace as supervisors, as leaders, it is going to be our responsibility to try and teach them to understand when they need to take that step forward, to take that leap, how to overcome some of those safety concerns they have. Now, one of the things that you heard the young man in the video say is that they're not afraid to try new things. They're not afraid to try something and fail. Don't equate the need for safety as a fear of some kind. I don't want you to hear me say that Gen Z is afraid all the time. They are concerned, they are cautious, and they are always thinking about their safety and the safety of other people. So it's not just a fear. It's not necessarily a fear. It's that need to be safe. So again, as they're coming in, this is one of the things that we're going to need to help them develop, a skill that we're going to need to help them develop. I would like to tell you that their parents have helped them, but we know that's not true. And I would like to tell you that the schools have helped them, but we know that's not true, especially right now, where a lot of the students are now doing online school with their smart device, by the way, where they're not having that one-on-one face-to-face teacher interaction where teachers can help them to learn these things. But let's go to number 3, which is the internet. So as I already said, Gen Z has not known a world without the internet. They do everything via the internet on their smartphone. They shop. Okay? Malls are going to die off, and COVID has already helped exacerbate that, make that go a little bit faster. They get advice on their phones. They can now get their medical attention on their phones. They can speak to a counselor on their phones, a psychologist. They can find friends on their phone. They can go to school on their phone. They can do training on their smart device. They can do everything via the internet on their smart device. And they understand that everything that goes over that smart device could become public or known to other people. So they are careful with that, but what is more important to them is being able to use it to be in constant contact and to constantly be able to get what they need quickly. Here's where this comes into play with the workplace and them coming into your work environment as your colleagues soon. If you do not figure out how to integrate the smart device into what they are doing at work, you are not going to be able to recruit them in to begin with. If you do recruit them in, you're not going to be able to retain them, because you are going to have to understand that they do everything right here. You heard in the video, they do not believe that there is a work life and a private life or a home life. It's all blended together. It's work-life blend, work-life integration. It all goes together. So one challenge that I have for those of you who are listening today is for your HR departments or any of our attorneys online who may be labor attorneys, wage and hour attorneys. You need to start a strategic plan for the next 5 to 10 years that includes how to handle a generation that's coming in that is not going to understand or be willing to adhere to, well, you can only work during these hours and not during these hours. You can't look at your email during these hours. That's not going to fly. Again, let's go back to, they are indefinite to the traditional ways, the way it's always been done, the policies and procedures, the laws. You have millennials who started this and they've just kind of gone along with whatever they've been told because they need to keep a job. But when they get that 20% extra power behind them and you've got 70%, if it comes down to laws, we're going to see some laws change. If it comes down to policies and procedures, we're going to see the millennials getting into those positions where they can change these things. And the Gen Zs are going to be their biggest cheerleaders in doing it. So I do highly suggest that HR departments, labor attorneys, wage and hour attorneys, go ahead and start that strategic planning and those thought processes. Try to stay ahead of the curve so you can work with them rather than being pushed out by them. Now let's go to I's 4 and 5, which are in person no more and insulated but not intrinsic. So we all know Gen Zs tend to be, as they do everything on their smart device, tend to be more inward, alone, by themselves, and they are doing a lot less in person. What that means is they have a lot less face-to-face personalization and a lot less face-to-face relationship building. Again, safety and caution. If I put myself out there, if I'm with other people, negative things could possibly happen, and I'm not sure that I'm ready for those things. The motivation to stay isolated and away from other people or away from groups of people comes from the need to protect themselves, not only from that possible physical danger and that psychological danger, but also from risks or commitments that could hinder or distract them from reaching their goals or from having the financial security that they are always looking for. So let's look at some, excuse me, of the outcomes that we could see from this lack of personal interaction and this need to be isolated. And again, this isolation, it's not intrinsic. It's not just this desire to do it for my own good. It's this insulation that has been programmed into them through school shooting drills and through the things that they see every day through their smart device on media. It has just been pushed into them, and it is just something that they live by. But look at some of the outcomes that we're going to have as a result of the isolation. We're going to see lower crime rates. Now, this one to me is very interesting. But if you think about it, it makes perfect sense, right? So if I'm not with another person, I'm not face-to-face with another person, we can't physically hurt each other. We can't shoot each other. We can't stab each other. We can't beat up on each other. Okay, that the homicide rate, the violence rate, sexual assault rate, all of that's going to go down because people are not together. So we're going to have a lower crime rate. Now, it'll take about 5 years before we start seeing these numbers. And keep in mind, right now, our crime rates are a little bit higher over the last few months because of the riots that have gone on. Notice I did not say protest, I said the riots. And the negative things that have happened, the breaking the law, things that have happened as a result of the riots. If you look at the groups that are causing the criminal infractions through the riots, you will notice that a majority of them are not in the Generation Z category. Okay, so about 5 years from now, when we look at those crime rates, we're going to see that they have dropped substantially because if people aren't together, they can't hurt each other. Okay. What we need to start teaching our Gen Zs, and as leaders in a workplace, it is going to be our responsibility to do this, is we need to start teaching them communication skills and relationship building skills. Because they have done everything with their smartphone, they do not have the ability to have a face-to-face communication, a professional face-to-face communication, and they are lacking in building those relationships with people. So we're going to have to start working with them to communicate better, build those relationships. My suggestion is, as you're doing your 5-year plan and you are thinking about what trainings you may want to have in the future, that you definitely build in communication skills training, relationship networking training, but that you also think about team building training. This is one of those things that is not happening with this generation. They can do team building activities as a group over their smart device, but when you put them face to face in an actual office or a boardroom, it's going to be more difficult for them to do that. So these are trainings that we're probably going to want to make sure that we have. I also want to give you one other thing to think about. If you are an attorney who is going to be representing Generation Z more in the next few years, and you put your clients on a stand in a courtroom, I want you to think about the mentality, what's going to go through the mind of a Gen Z as they have to go up to that stand. Oh my gosh, everybody's looking at me. What if I say the wrong thing and I hurt someone? Or what if I say the wrong thing and I'm embarrassed by it? What if I do the wrong thing? What if I don't look right? And they're going to have difficulty being able to testify the way that you want them to, because they have this constant communication going on in their own head, this constant rhetoric going on in their own head. My suggestion is, if you are that type of attorney where you are going to be putting people on the stand, is that you might consider having an expert on staff or on retainer who can actually work with these Gen Z clients to get them past that, so that they understand, they can practice, they can be ready for what it is they're going to experience, and then they can excel. Gen Zs are going to be fabulous. They just need to be taught the things that they haven't been taught at home by their parents, and are now not being taught in the schools either, because many of them are doing school on their smart device. And then the last thing you see on here is we're going to see a decline in civic involvement with Gen Zs. Now, I'm not telling you that they're not all about nonprofit activities, environmental, climate, protecting the environment and the climate. They're all about those things, but we're going to see a decline in civic involvement in person. We're not going to see as many of them show up at the Habitat for Humanity Build the House activity, but they may watch it on Facebook Live. They will donate money over their smart device through one of the pay apps. They will pay attention to what the nonprofit is doing. They may sign an online petition, but we're going to see less of in-person civic involvement. All right, let's go to the next I. This is number 6I, and this is insecurity. Generation Z is very insecure. They're insecure in themselves, they are insecure in other people, and they are insecure in their environment. And all of those influences that I talked about a few minutes ago feed into this. First of all, we have a massive mental health crisis on our hands with Generation Z. We had an uptick in the mental health crisis with millennials, but again, Gen Zs are going to make the millennials look like they were going at a snail's pace. This, again, the influences. Too much over the smart device, not enough personal interaction with people. That mental health crisis is showing itself in a couple of different ways. First of all, Gen Z is over anxious, as you can imagine. Me just telling you that thought process that they go through at all times, where they're thinking through what could happen, what would if, what do I do? That causes over anxiousness. Then depression is on the rise. Think about those of you who have kids, and when they hit that middle school age, they have retreated to their bedrooms in the dark with the blinds closed with their smart device, and that's where they stay until after they graduate from high school. Right? If their friends come over, then both your child and the friend are in the room in the dark with the blinds closed on their smart devices, probably talking to each other on the smart device, right? That has led to depression, and then the suicide rate has increased substantially. Then, of course, we throw COVID on there, and it's just making it even worse. Generation Z has a poor self-image. First of all, again, because they're not having that personal interaction as much as what they really should, where they're getting their impression of themselves is on social media or via the internet. All of the different things that they're watching, that they're seeing, and they are judging themselves according to that. So they don't have the personal interaction that they need, which is causing this. The online presence, everything that they're seeing on the reality shows, on social media, even on the news shows, is contributing to this. Cyberbullying is contributing to this. Again, remember what I said about cyberbullying. It is 1,000 times worse than what my 51-year-old self experienced as a 10-year-old on the playground outside my school. And then the last thing that is really contributing to the insecurity and this rise in the mental health crisis that we see is that Generation Z is sleep deprived. As a generation, they are sleep deprived. The smart device is on 24/7. It is a part of their body. It is an appendage. It lights up, it vibrates, it rings, it dings, it plays music, whatever it does 24/7, and it is interrupting their sleep. And I'm sure we all know when we are sleep deprived, then everything bad seems worse, and there seems like there's nothing good going on. So these are some things that we need to understand. I wish I could tell you these are some things that we could fix, that we could change, but we probably can't. What we're going to have to do is be aware of them. And as they are starting to come into the workplace, then we start to influence them out of these insecurities. There's one other insecurity that I want to talk to you about, and that's what brings me to this picture that you see on your slide here. And this is very important for your workspace and being able to recruit and retain Generation Z into your workplaces. For those of you who are not aware, schools for about the last 10 years or so have set up what they call safe spaces. And in a school, and this goes all the way down to preschool now, in a school, there may be a room, a classroom, it could be a group of rooms, it could be a counselor's office, it could be a nurse's office. It varies from place to place, but every school has what they call the safe zone or the safe space. Students can go to the safe space for a number of reasons. They can go there if they feel like they're being bullied and they need an escape. They might need someone to talk to. Usually in safe spaces, there is a counselor or an advisor that's attached to it that can help them. It could be that they go to the safe space because they want to think through how they're going to react to a situation before they do. They, rather than just lashing out or reacting or hitting or yelling at someone, they go to the safe space and they kind of think through the situation and how they want to deal with it before they actually deal with it. Okay, that's a good thing. It's cutting down on conflict, cutting down on some of the school violence. Certainly if you're being bullied and you go in there, that's a good thing because it's an escape. It's a place that you can learn to deal with it before it overcomes you to the point that that the student feels like suicide is their only out. Keep in mind too that when our students go through active shooter training or school shooter drills, what is the first thing that the teacher tells them? Go to the safe space. And in every teacher's room, they have been taught to figure out where in their room is the safest area for the students to gather as a group, because there's power in numbers. And so the school shooter drill starts and they say, go to the safe zone, and all the students gather together in a closet or a corner, furthest away from the door, out of the way that the window and the door can be seen, etc. Everything that Gen Z has been taught and is being taught right now, all the way from preschool up, is we have safe spaces, we have safe zones. And they are going to come into your workplace and they are going to expect to see a safe zone. I want you to think about how important this is going to be for you to implement in your work area over the next few years. I know it may sound silly to some of you. I know it may seem like a waste of space. People need to grow up and get over it, etc. If you want to recruit in and retain this awesome generation, you're going to need to understand what has influenced them and why they are the way they are. They're insecure in their environment. They're insecure in people, in themselves, and in their environment, and they're going to need a place to go to. If you want some really good examples of businesses that have implemented safe spaces, take a look at Amazon, Google, Apple. They all have really good examples of safe spaces for their employees. You may also want to make sure that you have an employee assistance program in place. If you don't, talk to your HR professional or to your insurance company, and they can help you get that set up. But just having an employee assistance program is better than nothing. At least your employees have somewhere they can go, someone they can talk to if they need to. Now, going along with that insecurity, we also need to address the number 7I, which is income insecurity. Remember in the video, the young man talked about it, and I have already talked about it as one of the influences that this generation went through the recession and the housing bust. And as a result, they want to make sure that they don't have those same financial difficulties that they watch their parents have. This is going to be a generation that saves rather than spends. And some of you may have already experienced this, where your children actually have more money in savings than you do. I know my 18-year-old has had more money in her savings account for the past couple of years than my husband and I keep in ours on a regular basis. And so this generation is really proving to be workers, savers. Now, what they want to do to make sure that they have income security is they want good jobs. They want to go to high school, go to college, and get a job. And what they're looking for in a job is somewhere that they can stay long-term. Now, that's a little bit different than the millennials. You remember, millennials tend to want to turn over jobs about every 3 to 5 years. That is not a dig on millennials. There has been a problem with that. It is what it is, and we have all learned to work with that. Gen Z, on the other hand, is looking for that long-term career. They want to be able to come in, to learn and grow, to maybe advance up to the next level, maybe get a little bit more pay, learn and grow and advance up. They want to be able to make a steady progression. They're looking for a good salary for the work that they do. They're not thinking they should be paid some exorbitant amount of money right out of college, and they're not thinking they should be made a supervisor 90 days after they come in. They're willing to work, they're willing to learn, they're willing to try and fail, but they're looking for that security. So they want a steady job, steady pay, and benefits. Those are the things that you need to be building in to your career plan for the next few years. Now, one question that I get asked a lot is regarding first responder type jobs. Are Gen Zs going to be willing to step into any kind of first responder job? The reason that this is being asked is because first responder careers have seen a huge decline in interest. Millennials overall are not finding first responder jobs very appealing. When I say first responder, of course, I mean law enforcement, firefighter, paramedic, military. So millennials haven't really gone to that side of the career spectrum as much. So now first responder careers are starting to struggle. If you've noticed, law enforcement, especially in corrections, are having to offer a lot of incentives to get people to come on, even if it is just for a few years. It's better than nothing. What we are going to see with Gen Z is we are going to see where they have an uptick in interest in these types of professions. Again, let's think about that safety and caution mentality. They are looking for a job that will always be there and is always needed, that will always have funding for it. We're always going to need police, firefighters, paramedics, and the military, where they can work hard and progress up the ranks over time. All of those first responder jobs fit that criteria. So they're going to actually be interested in those types of jobs. We should see an uptick in those types of jobs being able to be filled. But wait a minute, Christy, you said they're concerned about their safety, and why in the world would anyone concerned about their safety want to go out there and be a law enforcement officer who could get shot at every day? Well, I want you to think about this. What have Generation Z young people been taught for many years? They've been taught that if you practice how to deal with situations, then you'll be okay. They've been taught that if we practice, if we drill, if we run through it, if we know it, if it feels normal and natural all the time and we're good to go, if we try it, we fail, we back up, we figure out a better way to do it, then you're going to be successful. Guess what? That's when they'll do it. So what they know is in any of these first responder type jobs that they're going to be trained effectively. They're going to practice how to react in dangerous situations, and they're going to know how to do it. And they're going to have that confidence and that power to do it. Just like when your teenager is scared to go and get that first job, and they finally do, you finally get them to go, you finally get them to drive on their own and to walk in on their own, and they come home 3 days later and they're like, oh man, I love this job, this is awesome. It's because now they've gotten used to it. They finally tried it, they can do it, and they feel comfortable in it. That's going to be the case with everything. And so we will see a good uptick in Gen Zs running towards the first responder type positions. Now let's go to the number 8I, which is irreligious. There's not a whole lot of research on this one yet, because again, with this particular topic, we're having to look at the high end of the generation, the older end of the generation. Those who are ages 6 to 12, 6 to 14, they don't know really what their ultimate beliefs are going to end up being or what practices they're going to do. Right now, they're probably doing whatever they're being told to do or made to do. So this could change considerably over the next few years. What we do know about this particular category is that the older end of Gen Zs do seem to be quite spiritual. However, they are not embracing, they are indefinite towards, they're not embracing the traditional religions or the traditional religious practices. They are more into just understanding who they are, what makes them feel good, what makes them feel complete. That could be Christianity. It could be Buddhist. It could be Seventh-day Adventist. It could be no religion at all. It could be crystals. They're finding their way. They want something. They believe in something, but they're just not falling necessarily into the old traditional religions and religious practices. When asked why not, here is their answer, and this is going to lead us into our number 10I in just a moment. Most of them see traditional religions and religious practices as anti-accepting and non-inclusive. And when something is anti-accepting and non-inclusive, a Generation Z person will write it off instantly. So keep that in mind. We'll talk about that in more detail in just a moment. The number 9I is independent. iGens are extremely independent. They have not been shepherded into adulthood like millennials were. And so just in case you've not heard that term or you've not thought about what does it really mean, millennials are a generation where parents shepherded them into adulthood. Helicopter parents is another term for it. We did everything for them. We tried to make it as easy as we could for them. This is millennials. The reason being is because most millennials are children of Gen X's. Gen X, we were born to baby boomers. Those baby boomers were more interested in working, making money, having enough to last throughout their retirement and enjoy their retirement. So Gen X's as a whole were a very independent generation. We were latchkey kids. We took care of ourselves. We did our own homework. We have taken care of our siblings. We went out and got our own first job. We made our own money. We got student loans to get through school. That's Gen X, very independent. Well, when we had our first children, who are in the millennial category, we said, oh, I don't want my children to have to go through what I did. I don't want them to have to work through school. That was so hard. So what did we do? We shepherded them into adulthood. We tried to make it as easy as we could for them. Well, we as parents now see what that caused for the millennials. Again, not a dig on millennials. Love millennials. I think millennials have gotten a very bad rap in the press. But the millennial generation personality as a whole is one where it has taken them a little bit longer to figure out how to take that own responsibility for themselves. And that it falls back on the parents who shepherded them into adulthood. What we have found with Generation Z is that they watched those millennial brothers and sisters, and parents who have one of both a millennial and a Gen Z. We watched our millennial children and we said, whoo, we need to change it up for Gen Z. We're going to have hands off on this one. And Gen Z has said, I'm not doing what my millennial big sister did. I saw what kind of trouble she got into. I see how much student loan debt she has. I see that she can't buy a house. And all of those kinds of things, not making the Gen Zs go, I'm going to be more independent. I'm going to do it my way. I am not going to fall prey to some of the things that I watched my millennial siblings fall prey to. What this means for your workplace is you've got to make sure you build in that team building training in the future, because independent means they're not going to work well together in teams. We already know they're not going to work well together in personal face-to-face groups, but then you add the independent factor to it and it's going to be I can do it better all by myself. And you're going to need to make sure that you bring that team building training in as well. Now let's go to our last I. And I see that we're starting to get close to our time for question and answer. So I think we're going to be right on time. But our last I, 10, is inclusive. There's no other way for me to say this than to just say it like this. Generation Z believes that people are people. All people are equal. All people deserve respect. Until someone does something to lose your respect, they deserve your respect. Generation Z does not see skin color. They do not care where you came from, where you were raised. They are uninterested in your economic status. Whatever religion you want to practice is up to you. They don't care if you are biologically a male and you want to be a female. They don't care if you're biologically a female and you want to have the pronoun he used with you. It does not matter to them. Here's what matters to Generation Z. People are people, and we should all show respect to people, and we should treat everyone equally, fairly. We should include everyone. That is how they feel. And if you cannot embrace that and you cannot include that in your workplace, you are going to have a very difficult time with recruiting and retaining Generation Z. Think about the trainings that we have seen in the workplace over the last few years. Sensitivity training, race relations training, understanding and overcoming implicit bias. There has been a place for those trainings in the past few years. But what I want you to think about is going forward, Generation Z, as a general whole population, they believe that those types of trainings actually bring more negative than they do positive, because you're just hammering in the differences over and over and over again. When, if you want a good training, let's have a training in how to just step back, put some blinders on, and realize that people are people, and that we just need to respect people for who they are. So that's what leads us back to the irreligious part, is many times Gen Zs are seeing religions or religious practices as non-inclusive, and they are just not willing to stand for that. So you're going to have to make sure that your workplace is inclusive. Now, what does the iGen work environment look like? So they want a long-term career. They want a good steady salary. They want their benefits. We've already talked about that. But let's look at the things that they want to make sure that you have for them in the business. They want security. Of course, security, career, pay, benefits. But they also want security in their environment. Again, let's go back to the influences. School shooter drills. They don't want to go to the mall by themselves for fear they might get shot. They don't want to go out to a restaurant for fear somebody is going to hurt them, come in and stab them or something. I mean, they want security. They need a secure environment. So you need to be thinking about, in your building, what kind of security measures can you provide? Locks, key locks, badge entry, safe spaces that people can go. You are making sure that you are providing active shooter training and drills for your employees in your buildings. Also, security in an inclusive environment, making sure that they feel that the environment is secure for all people not to be made fun of, to be talked nasty about, to be discriminated against. They want that security in the environment as well. Learning. They love to learn. This generation loves to learn. However, I say this with every generation, I say this with any group of people, you don't know what you don't know. Generation Z doesn't know what they don't know. So it's up to all of us to, as we bring them in, to figure out what do they not know and to help them learn those things. I've already said communication skills, relationship building skills, team building skills, professionalism is going to be a big one. Generation Z, they are very realistic. They are very pragmatic. They are very truthful. And many times they will just say things, and it could come across as rude when they don't even mean for it to be rude. But we've got to be aware, and we've got to start working with them to help them understand these things. I had a training not too long ago. I was doing it with law enforcement officers, and I had supervisory staff. I had command staff in the room. And when I talked about this, one of the gentlemen perked up. He's a captain, and he said, I'm going to give you a good example of this. He works for a state agency that has a law enforcement division, and his state agency will actually bring in new law enforcement officers right out of high school. So at the age of 18, unlike some of the police departments and sheriff's offices where they want you to have a college degree, they will bring them in at 18, send them through the academy, and then they are law enforcement officers in this state agency. And he said he had a couple of new recruits, very young, 18, 19 years old. And they're in check-on one morning, and that their let's see, he is a captain. It's whatever the major came through and said, good morning, gentlemen. How are y'all doing? And he said, oh, good morning, Major. We're doing great. Thank you. And he noticed that the new recruits didn't say a word. And he asked them later, he said, did y'all not realize that when the Major speaks to you that you're supposed to speak back? And he said that they both had this blank look on their face. Like, what are you talking about? He said, did you realize that he spoke to you? Like, yeah, we heard him. Very realistic, very honest. Yeah, we heard him. Well, you should speak back. You should say, oh, good morning, sir. We're doing great. Thank you so much. They were dumbfounded. They had no idea that that is how they were supposed to respond to their superior. He said a couple of days later, here comes the Major through check-on. Morning, gentlemen. How are y'all? He said both of them perked up. Oh, good morning, Major. We're doing great. We're learning a lot right here in check-on. We're good to go. He said they didn't know what they didn't know. Once he taught them, boom, they threw it out there and they excelled right there, just something that small. So learning. And then technology, and I think this one is a no-brainer, but you've got to make sure that you stay ahead of all technology curves, understanding that everything is going to be done on a smart device. As you saw in the video, that the traditional office is not necessarily going to be the traditional office. I've given you a good graphic here. I like the upper right-hand corner where it says 50% of Gen Zs are online 10 plus hours a day, shopping, watching videos, learning, talking with their friends, getting medical advice, psychological help, whatever. So this is who they are. This is where they live. This is how they function. And you need to stay ahead of that technology curve. So as we tie up and get ready to go into our question and answer time, let me just leave you with a thought here. iGeners will learn to adapt to the reality of the workplace as they age, but the workplace will also adapt to them still in unknown ways. I want to give you a way to think about this. Think about if you're familiar with a good old Southern Baptist church, been around for decades. And there are members of that church who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s. They've gone to that church their whole life. They sit in the same seat every single week. They love singing those old hymns from the hymnal. But right now, in that good old Southern Baptist church, you also have 20s and 30s who are coming in and giving it a try. And they like to change up their seat every week to see something different, to be somewhere different. They like more contemporary music. They may not be at every single event every time the church doors are open. Two very different groups of people. If the 60, 70, 80-year-old people who've been there their whole lives and have their name, a name plaque on their pew where it's their seat, if they're not willing to try and acclimate a little bit to the 20s and 30s that are coming in, and those 20s and 30s that are coming in aren't willing to acclimate a little bit and to understand those that have been there for decades ahead of them, then what we're going to end up with is the 20s and 30s leaving, and we're going to end up with a church full of 60, 70, 80-year-olds that are going to die, and the church is going to die out. We're going to have to learn to acclimate, okay? The old hymns are great, but let's put a new beat to them. A choir was awesome, but a praise team with some guitars and a good bass and a drum set. You can take a hymn and you can spice it up. Let's learn how to try and acclimate, how to work together so that the church can keep going on. And in your case, so your business can continue to thrive and your teams can continue to thrive and to grow. So with that, the last thing I want to leave you with is my contact information. I am going to switch over to the question and answer screen in just a second and try to answer some of your questions. But if I don't get to something, by all means, please feel free to email me or call me at any time. And I will certainly take time to answer any questions I can or to try and get you some additional information or resources if I can do that as well. So that being said, let me go up here to the question and answer box. And I'm going to read you what the question is and see what we can come up with for an answer. So the first one says, how do you address a colleague from an older generation who considers things like safe spaces as making iGens too pampered or unable to deal with real life, often referenced in less than flattering terms. All right, so how do you address this? I think the most important thing in integrating Generation Zs into the workplace is to have open conversation about things. Gen Zs love for you to ask them questions, and they love to be able to educate us on what they're thinking, why they're thinking it. They many times won't just offer you information on their own, but if you ask them, and you ask them the right way, they will be glad to share that information with you. For something like this, for a colleague who's in an older generation and thinks that by making safe spaces and things like that, that we're actually pampering to iGens, wouldn't it be interesting for those people to understand why iGens expect those kinds of things or need? They have to have those kinds of things if they're going to come in and be retained in your workplace. So opening those lines of communication is vitally important. I also think opening those lines of communication and letting the Gen Zs themselves share that information is important. Perhaps something you can do is set up a training like this for all of the colleagues in your firm, and let someone like me come in and maybe even bring in a couple of Gen Zs to do a little panel where they can answer some questions. But Gen Zs are very open, they're very honest, and they'll tell you things like they are, but they want to know that you're gonna listen and that you're gonna be willing to try and accept what they have to offer. The next question is, if Gen Zs don't have the necessary communication skills or they need a safe space, what type of juror will they be? Oh, I think that is a good question. In my opinion, if they can't communicate effectively, then they're going to have trouble giving their opinion. So when the jury hears all of the information, they have to go out and they have to deliberate. That Gen Z is going to have difficulty joining in that conversation to say what they think. You could end up with a Gen Z as a juror who could be that one dissenting vote on the way something should go, and they'll go with the crowd because they don't know how to communicate that. Gosh, I would say, as we are starting to integrate Gen Zs into the workplace, and as leaders, we're starting to help them develop these skills, I would hope that those are the ones that we're going to start seeing in the juries. If you are an attorney that has to pick a jury, if you get an indication that that person is completely and totally freaked out by sitting there being questioned, you're going to want to think about, do you want them on the jury or not? And you may want to exclude them from the jury. You know how to ask the right kind of questions to see if they are able to handle that communication that they're going to need as a juror or not. How will attorneys be able to reach, a Gen Z on a jury? Same question. The next question is, you paint a picture of a generation of wimps. I sincerely apologize if what I said came across that Gen Zs are a generation of wimps. They are not a generation of wimps. This is going to be one of the strongest and most progressive generations that the history of this country will see. What I am saying about Generation Z is, right now, they are not well understood. And it is our responsibility as leaders, as business owners, employers, adults, older adults, it is our responsibility to understand that and to help them to overcome those things that could hold them back. The number one thing that is going to hold them back is that overanalyzing and that need for what if, I might not be safe. Let me step back and think about it. Some of you could look at that as actually a good trait, because rather than having a generation full of people who just instantly react to something, we have a generation of people who are actually willing to think before they speak and act. Let me go on with that question though. It says, do you think that their meekness will lead to a lack of resistance to political bullies who push racist and elitist agendas? And do you think that their passive personality will lead to their being dominated by their children, thereby creating a succeeding generation that will be overly aggressive and combative? Okay, there is a lot in this question. Do I think that their meekness will lead to a lack of resistance? Let me stop right there. Again, I apologize if I gave the impression that this is a meek generation. This is a very strong generation. This is a generation that does not speak up much, but they are very strong in what they think and what they are going to do. They are just thinking more about doing things before they do them. Is it going to lead to a lack of resistance to political bullies who push racist and elitist agendas? I'm going to stop with this question right here, and I'm going to ask, have any of you actually sat and spoken to an 18 to 23-year-old? I'm saying 18 to 23 because those are the ones who can vote. Have you spoken to an 18 to 23-year-old about what is going on right now with the presidential election? If you have not, I challenge you to do so. They watch, they listen, and they analyze, and they make a decision of how they want to go forward. I do not think that their meekness is causing a lack of resistance to political bullies who push racist and elitist agendas. I think that what some people may see as meekness, if you pay close attention and you ask them the right questions, you'll find is that they are analyzing and they are thinking, they are researching, and they are going to make informed decisions. You're not going to know what their decisions are if you don't ask them and if you aren't willing to listen to them. Let's see, I think we have time for a couple more questions. How do you see the legal profession in relation to Gen Z who are generally uninterested in lawyering, and how could we possibly encourage Gen Z to enter the legal profession? Oh, let's see. I don't know that Gen Zs are uninterested in lawyering. I believe that Gen Zs are interested in helping people to gain what they should be gaining, to helping people to get what they need, to be the best that they can be. What I am hearing more so far, and again, this is from that older end of the range, what I'm hearing so far is this is a generation of people who want to help other people achieve the equality that they feel they deserve. And I do think that as a lawyer, they could do that. I think we may see an equal number of Gen Zs wanting to go into the law profession. I actually had this conversation with my 18-year-old the other day as I asked her questions about the upcoming election, and she was sharing a few things with me. And I said, Baylor, have you thought about going to law school? Because you want to help people, and that is one of the best ways that you could do it. So I'll be curious to see. I'm not going to give an answer to this one specifically. I'll be curious to see over the next few years what happens if the applications for law school pick up or if they drop off. But I think we will see at least an equal number of Gen Zs going into the law profession. Let's see what happens over the next few years. It sounds like this is the rise of an introverted generation. What impact do you think that will have on necessary business networking? I believe as far as that question is concerned, those of you who've ever studied generational differences, I don't know if you've ever heard about the pendulum swings back and forth from generation to generation. So it's the baby boomer generation. The pendulum was here, and for Gen X, it kind of swung here. For millennials, it went back over here. If you look at the characteristics of baby boomers and millennials, you'll see that they have some similar characteristics. So it went over here to X, now it's going back to Z. So we went millennials and X, millennials, and now it's coming back to Z. Generation X has been known as a somewhat introverted generation, and that is more independent than introverted, having to take care of ourselves, having to get everything done, just get your nose to the grind and get it done because we had to take care of ourselves. And that comes from, again, being latchkey kids, parents that were off doing their own thing, etc. I think Gen Z, we're seeing the same thing. It's not necessarily that they're all introverted. It's that they are presenting as introverted like X's did, because they tend to be thinkers first and not just doers. Baby boomers were doers. Millennials, just do it, man. X's and Z's tend to be your thinkers first. Think and then act. And so that may come off as being introverted. As I said, I think one of the types of training that needs to be offered is how to build relationships and networking training. They are going to be cautious about entering an environment with a bunch of people that they don't know and trying to use skills for networking. So I would strongly suggest that, again, you add relationship building and networking skills into your training outlines for the next few years coming up. So that being said, it looks like all of our questions have been answered. So again, I'm going to leave this slide up that has my contact information. If you feel like I did not answer any question like you know, specifically as you would like me to, or you have some resources you would like to share with me, I always appreciate continuing the conversation after the webinar. And I do want to thank the Florida Bar for having me here today with you all. And certainly, again, thank my beautiful, loving daughter, Sheridan, for setting all of this up and helping me to feel comfortable to be here with you today. So with that, I will end my presentation and turn it back over to Sheridan and Chase. Thank you.
We will go ahead and begin the second segment of our CLE this afternoon. Ms. Rebecca Bandy will introduce herself, then present her materials. She has requested that you enter any questions into the Q&A box, much like before, and she'll answer all the questions at the end of the presentation. Ms. Rebecca Bandy, if you are ready, please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I am ready, and I do need to tell you guys, thank you for having me. And I actually had to teach a 4-hour class this morning, so it didn't get over until about 12:45. So I'm still a little frazzled from that. So I ask in advance that you have grace and have patience with me as I present today. I'm also one of those people that would rather talk in front of a room of 200 people than do a Zoom call because I find it hard to connect. So I'm learning, like we all are, to adjust to this new age and time, and grateful for every opportunity. So thank you for having me, and thank you for being patient. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about something I'm calling it the overcoming. I am the director of the Center for Professionalism here at the Florida Bar. And one of the things that we do is go across the state to bar associations, to law schools, paralegal associations, law professors, you name it. And we talk about the bar, we promote professionalism, we promote civility, we promote mental health and wellness. And what we've noticed is that there is a strong correlation between stress, mental health and wellness issues, and unprofessional and uncivil behavior. And so I have spent my career here at the bar being trained on emotional intelligence and mental health and wellness and mentoring so that I can share that information with you guys. I am an attorney. I practiced here locally for about 5 years, doing criminal law and also family law. And I have 10 years experience as a teacher. And so I probably sound more like a teacher than an attorney, and especially on Zoom. So again, thank you for having me, and thank you for any grace that you can extend to me as I'm learning these new mediums. So here we go with the overcoming. So So I named it The Overcoming, this presentation today, because I really love this quote by Helen Keller. She says, although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. And I don't know about you guys, but the last 6 months have just been a roller coaster ride of emotions for me and for my friends and family. And quite frankly, some days I don't know what day it is, what month it is. And so it's been a very interesting 2020. And, you know, it really has made me think hard on this idea of resilience. Interestingly enough, just before we shut down and went into quarantine, I had attended a conference at the Human Performance Institute in Orlando. And the theme of the conference was resilience. And it was so good. And I learned so much from it. And I couldn't wait to get back to share it with everyone. And then everything sort of hit rock bottom. And so today I'm going to talk about resilience, but I'm going to talk about resilience through the lenses of happiness and joy. And to get from happiness to joy, which is so important for us to do, we have to practice gratitude. And I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to give you some ways to best do that. And so as we begin, I like to begin my presentations with an opportunity for people to breathe, to relax, to calm their nervous systems. And so I'm going to put on some ocean waves, and I'd like you to take 3 complete breaths. Now, when you take these breaths, I like to sit up straight. I like to put my palms up, and as you breathe, you can close your eyes or not close your eyes, completely up to you. But I'd like you to breathe in as deep as you can to the count of 4. I'd like you to hold it to the count of 4, release it to the count of 4, and pause for 4, and then do 2 more just the same. And as you're doing this, what's going to happen is you're going to stimulate your vagus nerve, and that vagus nerve is going to send signals to your nervous system and your brain saying it's okay to calm down now. And this is an easy thing to do. We can breathe anywhere. So one more task that I'm going to ask you to do as we begin the breathing exercise is I'd like you to think of someone who makes you smile. So some person, your choice. As you're taking these deep breaths, I'd like you to focus and really just bring that person to mind and really think about that person as you breathe. I could sit and listen to those ocean waves all day. When you're ready, you can open your eyes and you can relax. And I hope that you are smiling, because when I think of someone who makes me smile or people that make me smile, I can't help but smile authentically from ear to ear as well. And I hope you're doing the same, because smiling and laughing are so good for us, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So the pursuit of happiness, we are always in search of happiness. We're always looking for ways to be happy, things that are going to make us happy. Oftentimes we look for substitutions or easy fixes to find happiness. We look for happiness in relationships and other people. We look for happiness in food. We look for happiness in purchases, in money and trips. Everyone is different, but we're longing for this sense of happiness. And unfortunately, happiness is a good thing. It really is a good thing, but it's pretty dependent on circumstances. So when we're happy, that's phenomenal. But when the circumstances around us change and things go a little south, right, does the happiness stay? And for most of us, it does not. When the circumstances change, our moods change. And so we find ourselves going up and down, up and down, up and down, when really we just need to stay constant and be able to find a happy place, a happy medium where we can find joy. And I'm going to tell you how to do that. So culturally, we're in the pursuit of happiness, but unfortunately, we're failing at it. There is a study that's done annually through NORC, NORC, at the University of Chicago. I was actually reading a book recently, and the book was talking about happiness, this topic of happiness, and there was a journal that went with it. And I was struck because the book and the journal both referenced this study. It was a couple years old, and they referenced the statistics from 2017. And the statistics made me really, really sad, because what they showed is that in 2017 and 2018, Americans were saying, according to these studies, that they were only about 34% of Americans were claiming to be happy. And I thought, that is so sad, that only 34% of us think that we're happy. You know, we live in America, we have freedom, we have all these opportunities. You know, it's not a perfect place, but for so many people to be unhappy, it just struck me as like, whoa. And so I started digging into the statistics, and lo and behold, about the time I was really diving into this material, the updated study came out. And so same folks, University of Chicago, at the beginning of quarantine, so this is a COVID response study, they released some really dire numbers. And basically, the number of folks in America, the number of people in America who claim to be very happy, is only about 14% right now. It's the lowest that we have seen since 1972, which is just devastating. Right? If you think about the people that you know and the people that you are around, your circle of influence and beyond, to think that they're really just unhappy, that should move you, or at least it moves me to the point of what can I do and what needs to be done. And I think we have to start with ourselves by really examining, are we happy? You know, am I happy? And what does happiness mean to me? And do I need to go a step further and get to a place where when things aren't so great, I can still be content, I can still find joy? And I think those answers are yes. And here's why. So according to this study, and I'm going to go back to this slide, but according to this study, there are two primary reasons why folks are so unhappy. The first one is a perceived lack of control. And granted, for most of us, we like to have control, but life does not allow us to be in control. And in 2020, we are definitely out of control. We don't know from day to day if we're going to go into quarantine, or we don't really know what phase we're in. And I'm still working remotely. And then there was all of these issues with my children in school, and, you know, the mommy guilt that comes with sending them back to school, and a whole plethora of issues with our attorneys in Florida adjusting to virtual court and learning new platforms. And so there is that sense of lack of control, and there's not a lot we can do about that. We have to understand we're not going to be in control all the time. However, the second factor that plays into unhappiness is our distractions. The amount of time that we are distracted in life, where we can't focus. And this is a real problem. It's a real problem for me, but it's a real problem for a lot of folks. And with distractions also come other issues. So in the legal field, we deal with high rates of mental health and wellness issues. These statistics are on the Florida Bar's website. If you go to the Florida Bar's website under mental health and wellness, you'll find this very screenshot. And it shows that as a profession, we have high rates of alcoholism, we have high rates of depression, stress, anxiety, and also high rates of suicide. We are actually fourth by proportion of professions in suicide rate, which is just so sad to think about. And here's the deal with these numbers. Most of these statistics came primarily from a study that was done in 2016 by the Hazelton Betty Ford Clinic, along with the ABA. And it showed these numbers, and it really struck everyone, and everyone is, really focused now in the legal profession, both nationally, but especially in Florida, on mental health and wellness issues. One thing about these numbers that has bothered me is that they're equally disturbing in law schools. And so what we see with law students is that the numbers actually escalate as they go through their experiences in law school, and then are high, and then these folks enter the legal profession and we're dealing with it. The other thing that really strikes me is that this survey, the one specifically done through the Hazelton Betty Ford Clinic, was dependent on people who answered those questions. And I've always thought to myself, who is answering those questions? These are difficult questions. And if they are answering those questions, are they being completely candid and truthful about these really difficult, hard topics that people just don't like to talk about? So my instinct is that these numbers are pretty low. Could be wrong, but it's just my thought, and it's been my thought. But more than that, these numbers are all from pre-COVID era United States. And so what are we going to do in our profession post-COVID when we've had at least 6 months of social isolation, a couple months of quarantine, and then all these months of social isolation? How is that going to impact us? And it really scares me, and I really am passionate about getting this information out to people to help combat some of these things. I suffer from anxiety myself, and so I can completely relate to that 19%, and I can tell you firsthand it's hard. And being in a stressful job, stressful position, all the changes going on within our profession can really set off some triggers. And so I'm here to tell you that there are ways to cope, ways to deal with it, and I'm here to help you find those ways if you fall into these categories. The other statistic that I want to mention is that there was a study done in 2018 and that said that being a lawyer is the loneliest profession in America. And I can tell you that someone that I really appreciate her work, her name is Gina Cho. She writes a blog called The Anxious Lawyer. I follow her very closely on social media. She spoke at our annual convention, Judicial Luncheon, a couple years ago. And she followed up that study on loneliness with an article that was published by the American Bar Association, and said that being lonely is our #1 mental health and wellness issue facing this profession. And I happen to agree. For most people, when they think about loneliness, it's not something that maybe would jump out at them if they were to read it online or in an article. But I've done a ton of research on this area, and I can tell you that being lonely is as strong an indicator of early death as is excessive smoking, excessive drinking, and obesity. Being lonely literally kills you. And there's tons of research that shows this. And so we're a profession that's stressful, we're a profession that's lonely, and we're a profession that has some pretty severe mental health and wellness issues. And as a society, we are the unhappiest we've been since 1972. So we have to really get serious with ourselves and take a look at ourselves and connect with those that are closest to us as far out in our social circles as we can, and really help to lift each other up. I do want to tell you how proud I am to work for the Florida Bar. The Florida Bar is a national leader on mental health and wellness issues in the legal profession. I personally serve on the ABA Standing Committee on Professionalism, and I can tell you that they're really, really excited about the work that Florida does, and they recognize our leadership in this area. Just this year, right before we went into quarantine, actually, the Florida Lawyers Helpline was established, and the number is on the screen, 833-FL1 WELL. This is a confidential service. If you are suffering, if you need to vent, if you need help in any way, call this number. It is part of our member services, and we aren't tracking it. So it's super important that you understand that. We also have our friends at FLA Inc., the Florida Lawyers Assistance Program. Their website is easy to access. I do a lot of programming with their staff. They're amazing, and also it's a confidential service. So please contact them if any of these statistics really ring true for you. One place that we can start, because the two primary issues that are cited for unhappiness are a perceived lack of control, right? And then the other is distractions. And so keeping in mind those statistics, we can really focus on the distraction part. For many of us, we are working virtually at least part of our time, and so we're tied more to our computers than ever before. We're tied closer to our devices maybe than ever before. I want to say that I understand that because I'm in the same boat. But I also want to urge you to really focus on how you're using your devices and how often you're using your devices. So my iPhone 11, if you go into your settings, if you have an iPhone, if you have an Android, Google, you can do similar steps. With the Android, I think you have to go into the battery power settings and do a couple more steps to find what I'm going to reference. But for Apple, it's super easy to do. I urge everyone to go into their settings and click on screen time and look at how much time you're spending on your phone every day. For me, I checked it first thing this morning at 8:30, and I was at 6 hours and some odd minutes. It's incredible, and it tracks it not just daily, but it tracks it by the week. And so every week I get a report which shows me how much screen time I've used and if that screen time is up or down from the previous weeks. Please look at this. Now, I understand some of us work from our phones. I do the same thing. I check emails from my phones. If you're on social media to connect with family and friends like I am, my family lives 3 hours away, that's also okay. You know, it's good to share pictures. It's good to stay connected, especially during this difficult time. However, what becomes a problem is that we are often on social media to make comparisons, or we get caught up in the comparison trap, or we're on social media just scrolling through mindlessly, not paying attention to anything that's going on around us. Or we're on social media and we become fired up and angry by everything that we're seeing and all the negativity that comes out of it. Simply be mindful of it and pay attention to it. There are wonderful uses. Social media has good purposes, but all in all, just be very careful. Statistics show that as Americans, we check our phones around every 12 minutes, So typically every 12 minutes, and I want you to pay attention to this too and think of yourself, okay? How often do you check your phone? How often do you open it up, and for what purposes? So on average, Americans check their phone about every 12 minutes. That in itself is not that frightening until you think about the total for a given day, and that is around 80 times per day that you're checking your phone. Even more than that, and this is really frightening, is that most of us cannot go more than 10 minutes without checking our phones. And if we don't, we literally get anxiety. And I want you to think about that. How often are you reaching for your phone? Just automatically, mindlessly reaching for the phones. They are attention-grabbing devices by nature. They are designed to grab your attention. They're designed to hold your attention. And if you are focused on a million different things on your cell phone, right? It's hard for you to appreciate what's going on around you, and it's hard for you to be happy and to find joy. So let's be conscious of that and make some better choices. I highly recommend an ABC documentary. It was a news story that came out from 2020 last year with Diane Sawyer, and it's called Screen Time. And if you Google it, it will come right up. It's on the ABC website, and it shows firsthand how these cell phones are interfering with our relationships with other people. Probably the most frightening part for me, I'm an animal lover, was they did a segment toward the end about how these cell phones are interfering with our relationships with our pets. And if you think about the fact that pets, especially dogs, they interact and communicate with us through our eyes and our facial expressions. When we're in our phones, that really impacts the way they're communicating with us. And so at that point, I was like, whoa, I need to really get a hold of my own usage. And I encourage you to do the same. So along those same lines, just last week, I saw a story, and I apologize for clicking ahead. I saw a story that was published on WFLA. It was on social media, and it said that of 1,000 cell phone users in Florida, 40% of people said that they would rather give up their dog for a month than their cell phones. And of course I was like, whoa, who would do that? Show yourself, right? Who's going to give up their animal instead of their cell phone? However, when I got to thinking about it, right, as a mom, I stay connected to my kids, to my family 3 hours away through my cell phone. I do my work on my cell phone. And when I really got to thinking about it, if I had to choose, it would probably be very hard to give up my phone for a month. Be very hard to give up my pets, but it would be very hard to give up my phones. So I want you to really focus on that as you watch this video. This video I'm about to show is actually from an alcohol company. I want to say it's a vodka company. It's made, that was in Europe. This is from 2018, so it's pre-COVID. It's pretty emotional, but it hits home. And I really would like you to watch it. I hope it doesn't, it could be a little sensitive, and I don't want it to be. I just want you to focus on what they're saying, especially in the beginning of this ad about our technology usage.
Pues una persona muy importante en mi vida.
Un compañero de vida de 10.
Sí, justo nos lo hicimos antes de venirme yo a Madrid.
Fíjate que es lo que voy a decir, pero yo creo que eres el único amigo que tengo. Estás amigo. Un hermano.
Gracias a ti me ha cambiado un poco la vida, como quien dice.
Y si no estuvieses, no sé qué haría sin ti.
La rutina, los horarios.
Ve por distancia. Él está en Barcelona, yo estoy en Madrid. O sea, realmente no nos vemos más por mi falta de tiempo. Y siempre ha sido como la incertidumbre de cuándo será el próximo momento en el que nos volvamos a ver, ¿no? Es una contradicción, no cabe duda. La gente afirma que sus seres queridos son lo más importante, pero la distribución de su tiempo no lo demuestra así. Esto tiene que ver con el modo en que funciona nuestro cerebro. Estamos programados para evitar pensar en el tiempo que nos queda por vivir. Así tenemos la sensación de que siempre tendremos la oportunidad de hacer las cosas que nos hacen felices. ¿Con cuánta frecuencia os veis? Una vez al mes, bueno.
A lo mejor 2.
Una vez, yo qué sé, 4 veces contadas seguro. Sí, o 2 veces al año, 2 veces al año.
Yo 25 años, 32. 39. Yo 38.
Yo 47 y yo 44.
¿Sabéis que con lo que nos habéis contado podemos calcular el tiempo que os queda por pasar juntas?
¿Bastante?
¿Queréis saberlo?
Sí, por favor. Sí.
Eso es muy poco. Eso es muy poco. Es terrible, ¿no?
Súper poco. Eso no es real.
Eso está mal. No puede ser. No me imagino no volver a verle. Esperaba años, no días. Pues hay que hacer algo ya. Hay que hacer algo. ¿Cómo perdemos nuestro? Porque lo perdemos. O sea, perdemos el tiempo haciendo cosas que no nos hacen felices.
Y que no cuesta tanto, que no vivimos tan lejos.
Ese día vale más muchas veces que todo el tiempo del mundo. Voy a aparcar el móvil y intentar dedicar mi tiempo a las personas lo máximo posible. Vamos a aprovecharlo.
That one gets me. So all of these statistics about unhappiness and distractions and perceived lack of control made me really think about the people that were the happiest people that I've experienced. Right after I came back from resilience training, I was asked by a close friend of mine who runs a cancer support group to come and speak on resilience to her hospital people and also to their family members, so the cancer patients and their family members. And I have to tell you, I lost a close family member to cancer last year. I was in the room when my uncle died. I am terrified of all things medical, and so this is a trigger for me. On the best of days, it's a trigger for me, and I really wanted to say no, but I couldn't, because I just went to training. I wanted to kind of put to use what I had been gifted through that experience, and so I also didn't want to tell my friend no. So I went to the support group meeting, and we started by playing the ABCs of gratitude. And this is such a fun activity. I use it with my kids at home, but I also use it at work all the time. I open up meetings by doing this activity. I do it with my staff when we have group meetings. And so you can use it with any age group, any group of people. And all you do is you go around the room using the letters of the alphabet. Each person has to say something that they are grateful for. And so with this group of about 15 people, we're going around the room, and they were telling the most beautiful stories. They were telling what they were grateful for. They were telling what made them happy. They were given descriptions of what they do to be happy and to find joy. We laughed, and at one point we were all in tears. They talked about their morning rituals of getting up and watching the sunrise and drinking coffee and, having their quiet time. One gentleman talked about a bird that he had rescued in his barn and that he had raised and watched the bird go and fly away, and then it came back the next year, and how he'd formed this relationship with the bird. One lady talked about an art class that she was part of. Another lady was part of a phone prayer chain. Literally just spent about 20 minutes going through this activity, laughing, crying. At one point, one of the ladies stopped and prayed, and it was just one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. these people were dying, most of them. They were severely ill. This was not, a group that should have been laughing and happy and content, and yet they were. And it was amazing. And so we followed up that activity. You can see in the picture there the circles on the gentleman's paper. And I had them draw out their spheres of influence. And this is also an activity that you can do with team members. You can do it at work. You can do it at home. But you start with yourself in the center, and then you literally draw circles to represent your spheres of influence, all the people that are in your life, all your connections. And then you go outward as those spheres open up. So for me, it would be me in the middle, and then my kids and my immediate family in the next circle. And then after that, I've got my friends, then my coworkers, and on and on and on. It is a tangible way to see all the folks that you have in your life, all the connections you have in your life, and a way to combat loneliness. Because again, this is a huge problem for us, and we also have high rates of suicide. So it's important for people to have something that they can look at when they're having a bad day. Following that activity, we made glitter stress jars, and I have my glitter stress jar on my desk. I actually ended up doing this with my staff here in our department. These are super cheap and easy to make. They're appealing. People like to come in and talk about them and play with them, but they're just a really good way to, they're pretty, and they're a good way to count your breaths. And so they're a stress relief jar that you can just shake up and watch. But as you shake them up and watch them, the idea is that you breathe as the glitter settles down. You take your breaths and you let yourself calm down as the glitter calms down. And I promise you, it really, really works. So encourage you to do that as well. So these folks were just amazing, and they were happy and they were joyful, and they had gratitude practices in spite of, facing death, many of them. Just absolutely astounding to me. So through my studies on resilience, I have come to love the work of Brother David Steindl Roth. Brother David Steindl Roth is a Benedictine monk, and he was born in Austria, raised in Austria during World War II, had a really, really difficult childhood because of his wartime experience. And then as he got older, he began researching and writing and speaking about these concepts of happiness and gratitude and joy. And he points out that happiness really is just circumstantial. As we talked about in the beginning of this presentation, when things are great, we're happy. When things aren't so great, we're unhappy. And most of us just end up on this emotional roller coaster all of the time, or we become completely numb, or we look for things to help us to be numb, right? We look for numbing agents like food and alcohol and all of these terrible things. And so what he teaches, and I love this, and if you're familiar with Dr. Brene Brown, I use her work a lot. I love her work. Her books are phenomenal. Highly recommend her Netflix special, her TED Talks. She uses Brother David Steindl Roth's work a lot and references him as well. So there's an overlap. But what he teaches is that we need to go beyond this concept of happiness, and we need to get to joy. We need to get to a place where we can be content and we can be at peace, no matter what our circumstances are. And so he actually defines joy as the happiness that does not depend on what happens. And I love, love, love that. Joy is the happiness that does not depend on what happens. So you can be joyful, right, which encompasses happiness, no matter what your circumstances are. And I love it. The trick is, how do you get to that? And he teaches that you have to practice gratitude. Brene Brown says this as well. To have joy, you have to be grateful. You have to lean into joy through a gratitude practice. So it's more than an attitude of gratitude, it's an actual gratitude practice. And that mirrored exactly what I saw firsthand from those cancer patients at the local hospital. Love that. So let's watch and listen to this video.
You think this is just another day in your life? It's not just another day. It's the one day that is given to you today. It's given to you. It's a gift. It's the only gift that you have right now. And the only appropriate response is gratefulness. If you do nothing else but to cultivate that response to the great gift that this unique day is, if you learn to respond as if it were the first day in your life and the very last day, then you will have spent this day very well. Begin by opening your eyes and be surprised that you have eyes you can open. That incredible array of colors that is constantly offered to us for pure enjoyment. Look at the sky. We so rarely look at the sky. We so rarely note how different it is from moment to moment with clouds coming and going. We just think of the weather. Even of the weather, we don't think of all the many nuances of weather. We just think of good weather and bad weather. This day, right now, is unique weather. Maybe a kind that will never exactly in that form come again. Formation of clouds in the sky will never be the same that is right now. Open your eyes, look at that. Look at the faces of people whom you meet. Each one has an incredible story behind their face. A story that you could never fully fathom. Not only their own story, but the story of their ancestors. We all go back so far. And in this present moment, on this day, all the people you meet, all that life from generations and from so many places all over the world, flows together and meets you here. Like a life-giving water if you only open your heart and drink. Open your heart to the incredible gifts that civilization gives to us. You flip a switch and there is electric light. You turn a faucet and there is warm water and cold water and drinkable water. It's a gift that millions and millions in the world will never experience. So these are just a few of an enormous number of gifts to which we can open your heart. And so I wish you that you will open your heart to all these blessings and let them flow through you that everyone whom you will meet on this day will be blessed by you. Just by your eyes, by your smile, by your touch, just by your presence. Let the gratefulness overflow into blessing all around you. Then it will really be a good day.
I love that. So peaceful. Can't help but smile. Here's the thing. Bad things are going to happen in life. We cannot help it. We can't control it. We have no influence. COVID's going to happen. Sickness is going to happen. Cancer is going to happen. Death is going to happen. People are going to lose their jobs. People are going to struggle. All of these things are going to happen, and we cannot be grateful for those individual things, of course, but we can be grateful in all things. How do we do that? He teaches a simple childlike process called stop, look, and go. And if you think about when you were a child learning to cross the street, what did you do? You stopped, then you looked both ways, and then you went forward. And that's what you have to do with gratitude. You have to stop what you're doing. You have to look around you and look at the opportunities, the growth, the learning opportunities, the experiences around you. What in this terrible time are you supposed to learn? How are you supposed to grow? What is there to be grateful for? And then you avail yourself. You move forward in that opportunity. And I love that simple reminder. So one trick that you can do to sort of practice this, and it's a mindfulness practice, is you can actually take an activity that you really loathe, like washing dishes. I hate washing dishes, and I am one of those people that washes dishes and then sticks them in the dishwasher. But you can choose anything, mopping your floors, cleaning bathrooms, whatever, something that you really don't like doing, and do it and try to focus yourself and your attention on the good in it. So how can you stop, look, and go doing an activity that you normally either would just rush through, not pay attention to, or really loathe doing? So with the example of washing dishes, you can enjoy the feeling of the warm water. You can enjoy the scent of the soap. You can enjoy how it feels on your hands. You can enjoy what it feels like, with the dishes. You can appreciate the dishes that you have and the food that you ate on those dishes. And it just goes on and on and on. It's just a matter of reframing how you look at the world around you so that you go from happiness, which is circumstantial, to joy, which is happiness that does not depend on what happens. Love it. So gratitude means grace, graciousness, gracefulness. I love this quote by Maya Angelou that says, "This is a wonderful day. I've never seen this one before." It does a number of things when we practice gratitude. And again, it's more than just an attitude of gratitude. It's an actual practice. You have to be conscious at it. You got to work at it. The more you do it, the better at it that you're going to get. So with gratitude, we acknowledge that we have things outside of ourselves. We acknowledge that there are things that come from other people and other sources that are outside of our control and that are still good and within our reach. We also, through gratitude, connect more strongly with other people. So people who are grateful and joyful tend to attract other people. And so if you think about the people that you are around at work or at home or in your social life, do you want to be around people who are peaceful and grateful and joyous, or do you want to be around people who are constantly in survival mode and grumbling and discontent? It helps us to connect with other people. It also helps us to connect with nature. One of the best ways that you can practice gratitude is spending time in nature. which is why I played the ocean sounds. For me, there's no better place for practicing gratitude than being at the beach. I grew up near Amelia Island, and when I'm going through tough times, I make the 2.5-hour drive over there, and it just really fills my soul back up again and helps me to kind of keep going through whatever is happening. It helps us to feel more positive emotions and less toxic emotions. So the toxic emotions would be greed or anger or jealousy or rage or comparisons, any of those negative things. Those are really hard to bring forward when you are steadily practicing gratitude. Instead, you tend to focus on the more positive. It helps us to take better care of our minds and bodies. There are scientific studies which show that people who practice gratitude tend to feel less pain and aches and pains, and people who practice gratitude tend to seek health care more quickly than those who don't, and so they take better care of themselves. There are some studies that show that practicing gratitude can help with limiting your food portions, your food control. So if that's something you're interested in, you may want to try a gratitude practice before your meals. Going around the table, for example, and talking about what you're grateful for is a good way to do that to help you with portion control. There are studies which show that practicing gratitude before bed helps you with sleep. And what happens, just like with the breaths that calm the nervous system, I told you by doing those breaths, it was triggering your vagus nerve to calm your nervous system. When you practice gratitude before bed, so writing out what you're grateful for, thinking through what you're grateful for, same thing happens. It helps to calm your nervous system so that you can fall into sleep easier and have better rest. There is a slogan I like to use, and it says, instead of counting sheep, count your blessings instead of sheep. So instead of counting sheep as you're falling asleep, count your blessings instead, and see how that works. When you practice gratitude, it helps you to not compare yourselves to others. So going back to social media and our use of phones, one of the big traps with device usage, and especially social media usage, is the comparison game that we fall into, and that leads to toxic emotions, toxic self-loathing sometimes, or we're overly competitive trying to outdo the Joneses. When you practice gratitude, it helps to curve that comparison game, which is phenomenal. It also builds resilience, and this is where I started with this research. So there are studies that show that Vietnam vets who practice resilience have lessened side effects from post-traumatic stress disorder. I personally do a lot of work with Honor Flight Tallahassee here in town. I used to, when I taught American history, would have World War II veterans and Vietnam veterans come in and speak to my students. And so reading through this research really meant a lot to me, because anything that can lessen PTSD for our veterans is amazing. But PTSD isn't limited to our veterans. And so if you struggle with stress or PTSD or anything that is, depression, just know that practicing gratitude can actually lessen the impact and can help you with resilience. Same thing, those that lived through 9/11, studies show that those with stronger gratitude practices, having lived through 9/11, were more resilient. So all of this, there's just study after study after study, which shows the importance of gratitude. Likewise, I highly recommend a book called The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor. Shawn Achor is phenomenal. He's also sort of in that same speaker circle with Brother David Stanley Ross and Dr. Brene Brown, very positive psychology group of people. But Shawn Achor is just a delight. His TED Talk is one of my favorites. It's also one of the top TED Talks of all time. He does a lot of podcasts as well. But his book, The Happiness Advantage, is phenomenal. I'm actually doing a book study right now with my team, and we are reading through it. And the statistics are just phenomenal. So happiness and gratitude, Sean Acor states, he's a Harvard researcher, and he states that, I want to make sure I give you these statistics, when the brain is grateful and positive, every educational and business outcome rises, and many health outcomes rise as well. Productivity, so production energy, your productivity rises by 31%. Your likelihood of a promotion, who doesn't want that, rises by 40%. Your intelligence rises. So there are studies that show if you're a student or if you have students at home, if you can have them practice gratitude and really focus on the positive before taking a test, they will perform better. Your memory is deepened when you practice gratitude, and you are better at forming social bonds. So there you go with the human connection factor, which is so important to combat loneliness, which we talked about earlier. So here's the deal. Bad things are going to happen, right? We want to get to a place where we have joy, which is happiness that doesn't depend on what happens, where we have joy, not for everything, right, but in every moment. And here's what Sean Acor says, and I love this. I actually have this written down and posted near my on my desk near my computer. Pain is inevitable, and this is his quote, but it's worth tweeting. It's a tweetable quote. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So through gratitude, you're going to have pain. Life's going to throw you those curveballs, but how you suffer is, and if you suffer at all, is totally optional. You can choose to focus on the positive and find joy in every moment, which I love. So how do we do that? We do that by training our brain. So if you see this image of the brain here, this is a pretty simplified diagram, but I love it. So at the very center of our brain, what we call the lower stairs, the downstairs part of our brain, this is the limbic system, and deep inside the limbic system is the amygdala. This word right here. And that amygdala is this tiny almond-shaped structure. That is where our emotions are, where they originate. And that little tiny organ can cause a lot of chaos because it is our fight or flight area of the brain. It's our emotional center of the brain. And it's right on top of the brain stem. So this is a very ancient part of our brain. And because of it, we've been able to survive as a species. So back in ancient times, prehistoric times, dinosaurs were chasing us, or tigers and lions were chasing us, right? That amygdala would go into fight or flight mode, and it's so lightning fast, like super lightning fast. And what it does is it sends us into alert. So we're in literal survival mode, right? And it will hijack the rest of our brain. We're not going to think about anything but survival, fight or flight. What do we got to do to survive? That worked well for us. It's so important. We needed it. It was great. We need it today. If you are in a car accident, or you walk up on a snake, or any of those scary things, you need the amygdala and the limbic system to help you survive. The problem is, in our day and time, is that we can't see the difference between a real threat like a dinosaur or a tiger or lion or a snake, and perceived threats like the heavy traffic we deal with under normal circumstances, or all the negative messages and images that we're bombarded with through our devices and on the news every day. We can't tell the difference between real threats and the perceived threats that come with just, working 80 hours a week and, instead of just a regular work schedule. And so you see the difference, right? So our brains, we can't shut it off, but yet we can. We just have to train ourselves. Our brains are a muscle. Our mind is a muscle, and we can train our brain to not be in survival mode all the time. We just have to slow it down. So this is your brain. I love this little hand activity. If this is your brain, your downstairs brain, like the downstairs of a house, right? This is where all the action happens typically. That's there, right? And then it's covered by the cortex of the brain. And then this area would be your frontal lobe, your prefrontal cortex, which is right here, right there, okay? And so when that amygdala is activated and goes into survival mode, literally you flip your lid. Literally hijacks your brain super fast, and you just, survival mode. We've all been there. So what we have to do is we have to put our lid back on, and we have to cover it up by re-engaging this prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobe. This is our rational decision-making part of our brain, and so we have to really calm down and think through, okay, what's going on? I need to breathe. I need to understand what's going on around me. I need to respond rather than react. The more you do it, the better at it you will be. And so the best way to do this is to start your day with gratitude. I recommend that people practice gratitude as soon as they wake up, while you're brushing your teeth, something that typically we do mindlessly without thinking. If you can practice gratitude while you're doing that, it will literally frame your entire day to help your brain learn, hey, instead of looking for threats to my safety all the time, I can just relax and look for the good in things. And so it's quite easy to do. You just have to force yourself to do it. Try doing it every morning, either in the shower, on your way to work, as you're brushing your teeth. With my kids, I started doing this years ago because they're only 15 months apart and they're always fighting. And so with them, I would have them do it in the car on the way to school. Here's the trick to doing it. So with my kids, I'd say, okay, what are you grateful for? And they'd say the same thing every day, or they would try to mimic each other and then they would fight over it. No, you want to do 3 things you're grateful for, 3 different things you're grateful for every time, and you want to say why you're grateful for it. In the why is the processing, and this is what really helps to train your brain to look for the good. So 3 things you're grateful for and why. Sean Acor says to do this every morning for 3 weeks, and literally you'll form that habit and help to retrain your brain to look for positives. So other ways that we can train our brains to practice gratitude. I've just listed some of my favorite ways. Meditation is something that I resisted for a long time. However, I love it. I had to start small, and if you've never meditated before, try to do it for a minute and then work yourselves up. Don't try to sit there and meditate for 20, 30 minutes because you're not going to be ready for that. At least most people won't be. So with meditation, you're not trying to do anything magically. You're not trying to wipe your brain out or reprogram your brain. You're literally training your brain to stay focused on the here and now so that you're not constantly fixated on the past, which is something I'm terrible at doing, or anxious about what's going to happen in the future, which is something else I'm worried about. If you have anxiety, you're constantly worried about what's going to happen. And so through meditation, you can learn to stay in the present. And it's just a matter of learning to stay in the moment and letting your thoughts go by like clouds or like waves on the ocean. I always feel like a hypocrite when I do this, but I do recommend a couple of apps to help you get started with it. So again, there's a difference between positive use in technology and toxic use. One positive use would be apps such as Headspace, Stop, Breathe, Think, and Calm. These are all phenomenal. Most of them have minimal charges, if none. And again, they'll help you to start off small and build yourself up so that it becomes easier and easier the more you do it. Try to spend time in nature as much as possible. It does so much for your brain, for your body. If you're in an area where you can, I live out in the country, I like to walk barefooted. When you walk barefooted, it's very grounding. It will also help to sort of calm you and to connect you to nature. So I highly recommend that. Of course, at the beach, walk barefooted, so you can feel it. And it's just an amazing experience. Again, you want to start your day with gratitude. I recommend a gratitude journal. You can make gratitude lists. So if you start your day with gratitude and then you end your day with gratitude to help with sleep, that's a good day, right? It's a really, really good day. Gratitude jars. So this is the gratitude jar that I keep on my desk. We had just emptied this right before quarantine. So when people come into my office, I have this jar right on the corner of my desk with sticky pads and markers, and I ask people to write what they're grateful for and stick it into the jar. And it usually leads to great conversation, and it's fun to watch it sort of fill up and grow throughout the year, and then we'll go through them and read through them, the ones that are not too personal, and just enjoy that. It's something to look forward to at the beginning of each year. So again, this is just a vase from home, but it works, and it's just a good activity. Smile and laugh often. I'm obsessed with Leslie Allen Jordan. I think most people are, looking at his Instagram fame over quarantine, and the whole point of his Instagram videos is just to connect to other people and make them smile, make them laugh. It's so important. When you laugh and smile, it does great things for your body. Smiling actually helps to relax your facial muscles, which is good for you and your skin. Laughing actually increases the oxygen that goes to your brain. It's wonderful for your brain. It's wonderful for your body because it will stimulate the release of endorphins, which make you happy. So definitely laugh and smile often. Be kind. Always practice kindness, even when it's not warranted. The class I taught this morning was on professionalism, and over again I heard, attorneys who were frustrated because other attorneys were not being kind. Two unkinds doesn't work, right? You can't fight unkindness with unkindness. It just leads to a battle. So you always have to choose the high road and be kind. Volunteer. Highly encourage you to volunteer. There is no better way to practice gratitude than giving back to other people. It was not comfortable for me to go to a hospital to deal with cancer patients. It was terrifying for me. It was literally, two really strong triggers for me, and yet it ended up being one of the best experiences of my life. This summer, while we were in quarantine, I actually joined a committee with the Kearney Center, which is our local homeless shelter. And I wasn't sure how it was going to work, but completely through Zoom and other platforms, we were able to raise $10,000 through a project that we did virtually for our local homeless shelter. And that's just, when you start looking at the statistics on homelessness and what goes on with food banks, the people that are really struggling right now, you can't help but appreciate what you have, even if you're going through hard times yourself. Spend as much time with loved ones as you can, as is possible. So important. And then I also highly recommend that you surround yourself with reminders of all the important people in your life. So when you walk in my office, you can see tons of pictures in my background, but all over my office are pictures of my loved ones and people that are dear to me, and notes. There's a reason for that. First, I just like, the warm and fuzziness of it, but literally it will remind you of all the people that you're connected to, and those social connections are so important to combat loneliness, depression, anxiety. Super, super important and easy to do. So even at home, especially at home right now, if you're working remotely, surround yourself with beautiful things, beautiful people, sayings that mean something to you. I got a call about a month ago from a former student of mine at 2 a.m. Terrified me. I picked up the phone. And his 18-year-old brother had committed suicide. And the tragedy of it, of course, is this 18-year-old who, is gone, but the family had no idea that he was at a place where he felt like there was no hope. And so I've been sort of being a friend to that former student, and just knowing that pain through them is just heartbreaking. This is a terrible, lonely time for a lot of people. Make sure that you're connecting, check on your people, check on yourself, make sure that you're okay as well. It's hard. Thank you notes. So on my desk, I keep thank you notes at all times. I don't bury them in a drawer. I actually keep them out in front of me with a book of stamps. So when I go to Publix, I buy a book of stamps. I get cheap thank you notes from, if I am shopping in a store or going to Target or Dollar General, any place. It doesn't have to be expensive. Studies show that we underestimate the impact that a handwritten note has on the recipient. So make sure that you're connecting. And by the way, as you're connecting, right, and spending time with people that you love, actually tell them that you love them. This is so hard for so many of us to do, but make sure you do it. Tell them that you love them often, as often as possible. Letter writing is back in style again. There is an organization that started in the United Kingdom called Letters Live, and Benedict Cumberbatch, a couple of other famous British actors and actresses really took the lead in promoting this organization, and they have wonderful videos and YouTube channels where people across the globe are reading personal letters live, and they're amazing. And so keeping in this idea of gratitude and love and spending time with your loved ones and saying, I love you. Let's watch the short video. It's a letter being read by British actress Edith Bowman.
I would like to read you a letter that was written by my granddad. This is me and him right here. This is a letter that he wrote to my gran, who was called Edith, who I'm named after. And I never met her, because she passed away very young when my dad was 3, and he always just talked about how much he loved her and how much he loved her until his dying day. And this is a beautiful insight in a letter that he wrote to her at the very start of their married life together, so I'm going to share it with you now. My darling little wife, no doubt by now you know just how much I love you. Just in case you don't, well, my own sweet wife, I adore you, only you, and it will always be that way. Maybe my ways are not what one would call the Romeo ways, but that guy never loved Juliet half as much as I love you, my Ginger, and I have only started to learn to love you yet. I used to wonder what it would be like being married to you, and now, my darling wife, I can tell you it's heavenly. I only wish I never have to leave you, but if I do, I will always have the knowledge that I'll be coming back to the grandest wee lassie in the world. You know something? I fell in love the first time I set eyes on you. Remember? Well, my dearest lover, I won't tell you any more now, but tonight. I love you, my sweetheart. Your adoring husband, Alec. Let every hour be winged with joy, and every day a blessing.
Say I love you. It means so much. Another activity that I recommend is this activity. This is from the podcast called The Science of Happiness. And I love The Science of Happiness. It's from the Greater Good Foundation from UC Berkeley. They have amazing resources, all things positive psychology, including gratitude, resilience, joy, happiness. But this episode was really powerful, a good reminder. This exercise is something that you would not do daily. It's too powerful to do daily, I think. It's something you would do about once a week. And you really need to commit time to being alone, to reflecting, to journaling as you do it. But the premise of this activity is to think about someone in your life. So if we go back to the start of this activity, of this CLE, I had you think about someone who makes you smile, and I asked you to put that person in your head, right? So through this activity, what you would do is you would take that person, and I encourage you to think about that now, that person that makes you smile. You would take that person and you would put them in your head, and then you would imagine what your life would be like if they did not exist, if they were no longer part of your life, or if you had never met them. And in so doing, what should happen is you should start to recognize how important they are and what an impact they've had on your life, even in the most small of ways. And it will make you appreciate them, and it will make you appreciate your life all that more. So definitely encourage you to do this. This one is really hard emotionally to do. Sad to think about people that you love not being in your life. But how many times have we taken people for granted that we shouldn't have? And so this is a good reminder not to do that, but to really value who we have. Final words. Only a life lived for others is a life lived worthwhile. Albert Einstein said that. I love this quote. And it goes back to just connection to connection. I encourage you, please take these phones, look at your screen time, really focus on where you're spending your time on them. And instead of hopping on social media or sending a Snapchat or going on and DMing people, right? Instead of scrolling Facebook, pick up these phones, right? Go through your contact list and start contacting people, checking in with them on a regular basis. And I encourage you, rather than just texting, pick up the phone, dial their numbers, FaceTime them, Zoom them if you can, right? Because in the end, eye contact matters, our smiles matter, but most importantly, our voices matter, right? Connect with those people. Think of someone in your life that you haven't talked to in a while. Pick up the phone, make a point of it this week, right? To do that and really have a conversation with those folks that will make all the difference in the world. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm happy to answer any questions. I did not get a chance to send my slides over, and I apologize. I had the workshop this morning, and so I did want to share some of my favorite resources on loneliness, gratitude, happiness, all things resilience. I love the Campaign to End Loneliness. This is a United Kingdom organization. They're phenomenal. Their website is packed with research. They actually had a CLE recently, their equivalent of a CLE recently, and of course the time difference made it impossible for me to join in, but I emailed them and they immediately responded by giving me their data. So they're just wonderful. Their social media, their videos are just very well done. And so I encourage you to take a look at their website. Anything Brene Brown, I just love her work. The Happiness Advantage. 10% Happier with Dan Harris is amazing. He was a newscaster who had a panic attack on air, and he began practicing mindfulness to deal with his anxiety. And so this podcast is all about how to deal with using mindfulness to deal with issues. It's a little dense. It really gets deep into the world of mindfulness, so it's not necessarily for beginners, but it's an excellent podcast. The Greater Good Science Center through UC Berkeley is amazing. I mentioned it. And then the Science of Happiness is another podcast that I highly recommend. But I'm here. I have an assistant director, Katie Young, who's phenomenal. Our program coordinator, Beth Kirkland, is phenomenal. We are more than happy to help in any way, to answer any questions. But more than anything, I want to thank you for your time today, your attentiveness today, and for allowing me to present on this really important topic.